On August 22, 1920, in Waukegan, Illinois, Leonard Spaulding and Esther Bradbury had a son whom they named Ray Douglas Bradbury. Ray went on to marry Margaret Susan McClure in September of 1947 at the age of 26. They then had 4 daughters, Susan, Ramona, Bettina, and Alexandra. Ray lived in California for most of his life and died when he was 91 on June 5, 2012. Ray Bradbury did not have a very spectacular upbringing. He attended schools in Waukegan and Los Angeles, which would become his home for the rest of his life. Throughout his life, he found an interest in oil and watercolor paintings, as well as Mexican artifacts. These slightly unconventional hobbies are the extent of the intrigue in Bradbury's pre-writing life. Bradbury began his writing career in the 1940s, working at multiple magazines. It was at one of these magazines that he met August Derleth, who encouraged him to compile his short stories into a book. This book later became known as Dark Carnival. His first major science fiction publication was another collection of short stories called The Martian Chronicles, released in 1950. His first and most popular novel, Fahrenheit 451, was actually a short story that was later expanded into the full novel form. Other novels, such as Something Wicked This Way Comes and Death is a Lonely Business, have also brought Bradbury much success. The latter novel, Death is a Lonely Business, was actually expanded from the world of Dandelion Wine, a short story by Bradbury. Ray Bradbury's literary achievements are staggering. His earliest major award was the O. Henry Prize in 1947, which he would also win again the next year. Other awards of note are his Benjamin Franklin Award for Short Stories, and his induction into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame in 1970. Outside of awards, Bradbury was a member of both the Writers Guild of America and the Science Fantasy Writers of America. Bradbury's career was absolutely incredible.
The novel opens with a 35-year-old Guy Montag gleefully burning a building full of books. The narrator then goes on to explain that books are banned by government mandate, and all books found must be burned along with the building they are found in. The book burning is carried out by the firemen, a job which Montag joyfully excels at. On his way home after the burning, he meets a young, eccentric girl named Clarice McKellen. The two talk, and Montag finds out she is his neighbor. He is also conflicted by the question Clarice asks him, "Are you happy?" He then arrives home to find that his wife Mildred has attempted suicide by consuming an entire bottle of sleeping pills. Medical workers are called, and they pump her stomach and clean her blood. Montag sits beside his wife, watching the new blood take effect. He suddenly hears laughter from Clarice's house and goes outside to eavesdrop. He hears a voice, probably Clarice's uncle. He's talking about the past when men used one another without any qualms. Montag returns home and tries to sleep, but his mind is buzzing with the thoughts of Mildred, Clarice, her uncle, and sleeping tablets and fire. He finally takes a sleeping tablet himself and slides into a deep slumber. The next morning, Millie remembers nothing of the night before, and Montag goes back to work despite the bizarre events from the previous night. On his way into work, he sees and has a conversation with Clarice again. After getting to work, Montag is scared by the mechanical hound in the firehouse, then plays cards with his coworkers. Montag and Clarice continue to speak on Montag's way to and from work for the next few weeks. After speaking with Clarice, Montag eventually gets curious enough to question his boss, Captain Beatty, about the origin of the firemen. Beatty tells Montag that it has always been this way, and Montag accepts the answer but has some doubt remaining. On his next call, Montag is so curious about the books that he actually steals one from the burning house. His internal conflict with his job is greatly strengthened when the lady in the house decides to kill herself in the fire, and Beatty lets her. Montag's night worsens when he arrives home, learns that Clarice has been killed, and realizes that he nor his wife could remember the first time that he and Mildred had met. Montag then feels sick and decides not to go to work. Beatty then goes to Montag's house and lets him know that he knows that Montag has the book. Beatty then tells the truth about how the firemen started burning books. People were unhappy being given things to think about, so the government had what they believed to be the source of deep thought outlawed. Beatty gives Montag an ultimatum: return the stolen book within 24 hours or suffer the consequences. Later, Montag reveals to Millie that he had actually been taking books for about a year. He then convinces Millie to keep it his secret and stay with him. Montag begins reading aloud to Millie, who does not like or understand the books. As Millie and Montag contemplate their next move, Montag remembers his meeting with a man in the park about a year prior. The man, Faber, a former English professor, is one that causes Montag to first question his life. Snapping back to the present, Montag decides to go on to Faber's house in order to make a copy of the Bible that he had stolen. On the way, Montag attempts to read it, but is interrupted by the intercom on the train. He sends Montag into a frenzy, making himself look insane in public. Montag then arrives at Faber's house, where he vents his problems and reveals his intentions of copying the book. Faber cannot copy the book and refuses to help Montag destroy the firemen out of fear. Montag then uses his Bible to extort help out of Faber. Faber gives Montag a two-way radio earpiece so he can aid Montag in any situation he may need help with. At home, Montag throws a tantrum after listening to Mildred's friend disrespect their husbands, soldiers, and politicians. He goes so far as to read them a poem from one of his books. The firemen are prepared to report Montag when Faber gives him instructions on how to save himself. That night, when he arrives at work, Montag is greeted by Beatty, who takes the book that Montag tries to pass off as the one he took. There is then an alarm, and the firemen take off. They arrive after an uncomfortable conversation between Montag and Beatty. This is when Montag realizes that they are at his house. Montag watches in disbelief as Mildred runs past him into a car. Beatty informs him that it was in fact Mildred who put up the alarm, and that it will be Montag himself that will burn down the house before he is arrested. Montag takes the flamethrower and does as he is told, while being sure not to burn his hiding place for the books. He actually enjoys the torching, being able to destroy the horrible memories. Outside, Beatty waits to arrest Montag, but stops and takes the earpiece from him. In order to protect Faber and make his escape, Montag turns the flamethrower on Beatty, killing him. Then the mechanical hound goes after Montag, but also suffers a fiery demise. Montag escapes the other firemen and runs towards Faber's house. Faber gives him new clothes, a drink, and instructions on how he could possibly escape the new robotic hound that was tracking him. Montag does as Faber says and heads for the river. Once there, he sheds his clothes and puts on the new ones in an attempt to change his scent. He sees the hound one more time upriver, but it abandons its search before it locates Montag. Once out of the river, Montag stumbles upon a group of people that end up being like him. These people also escaped society with their knowledge of books. The leader, Granger, shows Montag a television with the chase for Montag on it. He then explains that because they have officially lost the real Montag, the hound will kill a random citizen who they will pass off as Montag. Granger goes on to explain that each of the people in their camp has a book memorized in order to preserve the knowledge without carrying evidence. Then the television announces that the war, which was hinted at multiple times in very little detail throughout the story, has been declared. Bomber jets fly past the group, and the city is destroyed in a nuclear explosion. In the aftermath, Montag stands up and proclaims that he remembers his book. Many parallels can be observed between the societies of The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451. Despite there being distinct variations in their respective ideologies and principles, the cultures of these two works of literature share multiple similarities. The primary conclusions to be drawn from the connections henceforth are that both the societies share materialistic tendencies, are highly conformist, and feign justice. Insatiability is a quality that can be applied to most people in any given society. However, it is extremely prevalent in the citizens of Venice and the characters of Fahrenheit 451. In The Merchant of Venice, Shylock undoubtedly demonstrates the qualities of a miser. He values his gold more than almost anything, including his daughter. 2,000 ducats in that, and other precious jewels. I would my daughter were dead at my foot, and the jewels in her ear. Shylock essentially would pardon the death of his daughter if it meant his money would be returned to him. The preoccupation with objects is also seen in the first suitors to Portia and their selection of caskets. Morocco and Aragon choose the valuable gold and silver caskets respectively, instead of the seemingly worthless lead casket. The society of Fahrenheit 451 is equally concentrated on material goods and consumerism. Mildred, Guy Montag's wife, is shown to be constantly engrossed talking to the family in her walls, giant television screens that build the parlor. The first instant of Mildred's materialism was shown in her desire to have a fourth wall put into place, despite the fact that it was 1/3 of Montag's yearly pay, and the third wall was put in only 2 months ago. The society in Fahrenheit 451 is concerned with electronics and technology, not unlike our current one today. Although the people of the respective societies yearn for different objects of value, the blatant materialism that connects them validates how similar the societies are. Another similarity of the two societies is the forceful confirmation of their citizens. In The Merchant of Venice, there is an underlying anti-Semitic attitude that applied to both the majority of the characters and the audience the play was intended for. The hatred of Jews was apparent to some degree in every non-Jewish character, most notably Antonio and Gratiano. While The Merchant of Venice centered on racism, the conformist society in Fahrenheit 451 was instead directed toward knowledge, more specifically the lack thereof. The public in Fahrenheit 451 were afraid to think for themselves, and as such allowed the government to do it for them. This resulted in the banning of books and the glorified worshipping of television, a media source that could be easily controlled. By regulating what their citizens knew, the government was able to successfully force the people into a single, unanimous mindset. Both the societies in the literary works enforce and reinforce specific ideals and doctrines, thus exhibiting another way in which they are similar. The final connection that can be made between the societies of The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451 is how they mutually feign justice. Instead of allowing their citizens to execute their own forms of justice, the societies take over for a warped, idealistic form of justice that, in hindsight, can be seen as not fair at all. Shylock had created a fair bond with Antonio that should have resulted in the extraction of a pound of Antonio's flesh. However, the court case instead ended with Shylock being prosecuted for attempting to kill another man. The society falsely justified letting the party against the which he doth contrive shall seize one half his goods, the other half comes to the privy coffer of the state, because it was prejudiced against Shylock. In Fahrenheit 451, justice is only attempted to control the public, lest they attempt something similar. Due to this, the supposed justice is likely not fair at all. When Montag is being chased down, the media shows the killing of another man on television, pretending that it is Montag who died. The public then believe Montag was punished, and that if they do the same thing, they will be likewise criminalized. In reality, it was a random, unlucky individual who had done nothing but satisfy the government's need for a scapegoat. Both societies in these stories employ a twisted and cruel version of justice to control their citizens. This shows how similar the societies in The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451 really are. When the societies in two stories share so many similarities, it is not unlikely for certain characters to share the traits forced upon them by those societies. This is the case for many parallel characters in The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451. More connections can come from the perspectives of the characters, as well as their roles in the story. As demonstrated in the connections between the materialism of the two societies, both Shylock and Mildred are characters that are largely influenced by their avarice. Shylock is a usurer with high rates of interest, the obvious intention being to get richer. His greed was only overpassed by his desire for revenge. However, it is still a very distinct part of his persona, and it serves as the underlying reason for many of his choices and actions.
Mildred, on the other hand, is obsessed with technology and objects. She loves her car and her television and is content to spend all her time driving or watching senseless television shows. She is constantly ignoring Guy to go buy her more, even when it appears that they may not have the money to afford such luxuries. Both Mildred and Shylock are greedy and materialistic, with this trait being largely encouraged by the society in which they both live in. More parallels can be drawn from the characters of Clarice and Shylock. Both of these characters live in a society with immoral principles and ethics. The similarities are seen in the fact that both of these characters are affected personally by the results of those principles and ethics, and are highly aware of them. Shylock, being a Jew, is persecuted constantly and isolated because he lives in a prejudiced society. Clarice is also isolated because she shouldn't be aware of how her society functions. She is prejudiced against because she questions the way that her society functions rather than just accepting it. The first time Montag meets Clarice, he makes the uneasy observation that she thinks too many things, thus supporting the fact that Clarice is different and unusual from normal people in that society. Shylock and Clarice are both dissimilar from the average characters of their stories, therefore they are similar to each other. Characters can be connected by their traits and characteristics, but they can also be defined by the roles they play in their story. Using this logic, a connection can be made between Faber and Bassanio, who serve as two loyal counterparts to their respective protagonists, Montag and Antonio. Initially, Faber provides a source of background knowledge and information for Montag. Later in the story, Montag begins to increasingly rely on Faber for his choices and actions. This support is highlighted when Montag is being chased by the authorities, and Faber provides Montag with a safe place to stay and a solid plan for escaping. Without Faber, it is unlikely that Montag could have accomplished anything that he did, nor escaped the consequences of his actions. Similarly, in The Merchant of Venice, Antonio is greatly helped by Bassanio during the court case. It is thanks to Bassanio's love for Portia that she was able to come and salvage the court trial. The actions of Faber and Bassanio literally saved the lives of their friends, thus proving their similarity. The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451 have many connecting themes integrated into their stories and characters. Three themes that can be noted within the two literary works are isolation, destructive characters, and prejudice. When considering isolation, many character examples can be thought of, Shylock from The Merchant of Venice and Faber and Clarice from Fahrenheit 451. However, isolation can also be applied to more abstract ideas, in this case the isolation of knowledge in favor of ignorance and misunderstanding. This is applicable in Fahrenheit 451, where any forms of literature are banned, and the information stored in those books is only remembered by the few people who care to read them, as well as The Merchant of Venice, where the general public is uneducated and ignorant about Jews. Knowledge is isolated in both stories, and any characters that are aware of this are also isolated. Both The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451 have their fair share of destructive characters. The most blatant in each story are Shylock and Captain Beatty. Shylock can be considered a destructive character because his desire for vengeance shifted his moral compass to a point where he was willing to murder Antonio because he felt victimized by him. Fahrenheit 451 has a particularly destructive character as well, Captain Beatty. He is the ruthless fire chief and is Montag's boss. Beatty is ironically well-versed in literature, despite his job encouraging the annihilation of it. Furthermore, he uses his knowledge of it to fuel his cruel lectures and discussions in an attempt to make himself appear more frightening and controlling. Both Shylock and Beatty serve as antagonists for their stories, a simple reason for why they would be destructive characters. Prejudice is another common theme between The Merchant of Venice and Fahrenheit 451. Following along with the theme of isolation, both societies inflict prejudice upon those who are isolated. In The Merchant of Venice, Jews are prejudiced against because the society is anti-Semitic. In Fahrenheit 451, Clarice and Faber are prejudiced against because they have a heightened awareness about the world around them. Both groups of people are treated unfairly in their society, demonstrating once more how prejudice and other themes are congruent in these two works of literature.
There is one very clear connection between the societies of To Kill a Mockingbird and Fahrenheit 451. This connection is the fact that the people in the societies have the mindset of guilty until proven innocent. This is apparent in Fahrenheit 451 whenever the firemen are alerted to a call. Whenever they arrive at a house, they destroy the property and pour kerosene into the house before they even find the books. In To Kill a Mockingbird, The people of Maycomb treat an accusation of a black person as if it were a conviction. This is shown very clearly when the lynch mob arrives at the jail to kill Tom Robinson before the trial is even over, as well as when the jury convicts Robinson even after Atticus proved beyond reasonable doubt that he was innocent. Despite being in different eras and having different issues, the societies of Fahrenheit 451 and To Kill a Mockingbird are actually quite similar. Both Guy Montag and Atticus Finch pursue what they believe in despite public opinion. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus defends Tom Robinson, a Negro, even though his town of Maycomb is highly racist and disapproves of his actions. Similarly, in Fahrenheit 451, books are illegal and owning books is immoral. Despite this, Montag saves some books from fires and is eventually persecuted for it. Two themes that play a significant role in both To Kill a Mockingbird and Fahrenheit 451 are justice and isolation. In To Kill a Mockingbird, justice is portrayed in the flawed court system that results in the unjust conviction of Tom Robinson. In Fahrenheit 451, justice is brought about by burning down the houses of those accused of owning books. Furthermore, in To Kill a Mockingbird and Fahrenheit 451, there is heavy themes of isolation. Characters such as Boo Radley and Atticus Finch are isolated from their society due to their nonconformist attitudes. In Fahrenheit 451, Faber, Clarice, and Montag are isolated because they realize the truth of the laws in their society. Fahrenheit 451 and To Kill a Mockingbird are akin to one another because they share common themes of justice and isolation. Both Guy Montag and Miss Skeeter are the protagonists of their stories. They also begin their novels as conformists to the society in which they live. Both, however, change their views on society and attempt minor revolutions. They also turn their backs on their family's traditions in favor of what they feel is right. At the end of each story, Montag and Skeeter end up happy, yet in some way alone. Abilene and Faber are the old and wise confidants of the younger, more ambitious protagonists of Miss Skeeter and Montag. They are both characters that have experienced a lifetime of oppression that has made them passionate about the cause brought to them by the protagonist. However, in both cases, the oppression that made them so passionate has also made them very reluctant to help, but eventually do. Even their jobs are similar, in that Faber was an English professor before books were outlawed, and Abilene left her job as a maid to pursue a career in writing. Both characters, Clarice McClellan and Miss Celia, seem to live oblivious to the hardships within their society. Unlike Miss Celia, Clarice is later revealed to be very aware of her society's problems and simply chooses to make the best of it. They are both young, though Clarice is younger, and almost overly happy. Miss Celia, however, is revealed to only be pretending to be happy due to her multiple miscarriages. Because of these things, Clarice and Miss Celia are actually the most similar in the way that they are both initially portrayed as very simple characters that are then expanded upon into much deeper ones. The societies of Fahrenheit 451 and The Help seem to be very different on the surface. The Help takes place in the 1960s and therefore has technology associated with that era. On the other hand, Fahrenheit 451 takes place in a dystopian future that is not given an exact date. However, you know it is the future because there's advanced technology and they make references to Earth's history. However, looking past the time period and technology, the way that the two societies act is quite similar. In both societies, people are attacked and even killed for being different. Another similarity is that most of the people in the society either support the assault and murder or simply ignore it. These societies are different on the surface, but quite similar underneath. Both The Help and Fahrenheit 451 deal with the topic of isolation, and they both focus on the theme of rebelling against the family's traditional state of mind. This theme is highlighted in the characters Montag and Miss Skeeter. With Miss Skeeter, the rebellion is made clearer because she often says how she does not like the way her family acts, specifically her mother. Guy Montag turning against his family is more subtle because it is only mentioned once that he is the latest in a line of firemen in the Montag family. The end result of both of these two rebelling against their families is personal satisfaction, despite losing the people they once considered close. They seemingly stand by and are proud of their choices and broke away from what was an unjust mindset.
Connections between Inherit the Wind by Jerome Lawrence and Robert. Societal connections. The society in Inherit the Wind is that of a homogeneous one, wherein the Hillsborough inhabitants all think the same way. This tradition-bound society also, as a whole, opposes any new ideas brought into the society that adds controversy and encourages debate. Once a new idea, such as Darwin's species of origin, is introduced, the society reacts in fury and strives to repel it. In addition, the society in Inherit the Wind is also that of a systematic whole where everyone has their individual role. The society in Fahrenheit 451 is one of repetition and boredom in a futuristic time period. New ideas that add controversy are also a crime of the state. Specifically, books are a crime against the state, and antagonist Captain Beatty explains why by saying that books always disappoint people and the solution that is accepted by everyone is to just get rid of them. Moreover, as a result of technology, the society has become a whole, meaning there is no diversity in speech and action, and anyone who acts differently is deemed unsociable. These two societies are similar as both societies are of a homogeneous nature, where new ideas are unwelcome as they bring controversy, debate, and disappointment to one side of a two-sided argument. The society of Inherit the Wind repels the idea of Darwinism, while in Fahrenheit 451, books are being burnt in the society as they introduce conflicting theories and new ideas. Also, both societies are against those that are different. For example, in Inherit the Wind, Bertram Cates had conflicting views of the society and thus was condemned by Reverend Jeremiah Brown. Similarly, in Fahrenheit 451, Clarice was discriminated against because she acted differently than the societal norm. Therefore, the societal parallels between Fahrenheit 451 and Inherit the Wind are evident in the character perceptions of one another. Thematic connections. In Inherit the Wind, the majority of people believe in the Bible, which causes large uproars to occur when theories that go against or don't follow the Bible's teachings are introduced. This is shown when Darwinism is introduced to the town of Hillsborough. This repulsion led Henry Drummond, the criminal defense attorney, to be able to argue that not only is the law of the state being attacked, but the right to think as well. The technological advances in the society of Fahrenheit 451 has enveloped people and turned them into government-designed clones. The government is able to accomplish this by burning all books, so no one is able to acquire the knowledge to create controversy or debate, thus destroying the right to think. Both stories are thematically similar as both revolve around the issue of the right to think. Both stories have influential societies that impact the individual's right to think, and in order to progress in the thinking movement, the protagonists undergo a psychological reflection that impacts their lifestyle. For example, in Inherit the Wind, Henry Drummond is able to reflect on his childhood experience with Golden Dancer, the fact that not everything is what it seems, and is able to help Bertram Cates realize that thinking and having an idea is not wrong.
Likewise, in Fahrenheit 451, Guy Montag undergoes a tremendous psychological shift that leads him to reevaluate his current life situations, which in turn leads him to changing his ways from fireman to the opposite way, a wanted criminal. A theme statement that can be used for both stories is, the right to think is an issue that requires much thought and development before it can be accepted. There are many parallels between the characters of Fahrenheit 451 and Inherit the Wind. The protagonist in Fahrenheit 451, Guy Montag, realizes the error of his past ways and strives to change. In the past, Guy Montag was a destructive fireman who aimed to destroy and burn all books that were symbols of knowledge. Similarly, the protagonist in Inherit the Wind, Henry Drummond, realizes and reflects that everything is not what it seems and aims to help the society of Hillsborough realize the right to think. Both protagonists are similar as they both fought for the right to think. Also, both antagonists are fairly similar as they aim for the destruction of knowledge. Captain Beatty, antagonist of Fahrenheit 451, continuously tries to persuade Montag to stop his search of knowledge and return to the world of burning books. Similarly, in Inherit the Wind, Matthew Harrison Brady is the prosecutor of the case, where schoolteacher Bertram Case was trying to teach the origin of the species in Bible-oriented Hillsborough. The origin of the species can represent new knowledge, similarly to how books represent knowledge. A foil in a piece of writing is an unfavorable character that leads the reader to favor another character, normally the protagonist. The foil in Fahrenheit 451 is Mildred, Montag's wife, and the foil in Inherit the Wind is Reverend Jeremiah Brown. Mildred is normally portrayed in Fahrenheit 451 as a materialistic wife that never thinks before acting. Those actions lead the reader to view her as annoying and intrusive, thus leading the reader to view other characters, specifically Guy Montag, as more amiable. Reverend Jeremiah Brown is depicted as an overzealous man condemning his own flesh and blood. Those actions lead to the reader viewing him as rash and thusly favoring the actions of the protagonist. Lastly, Confidant Faber from Fahrenheit 451 and Confidant Bertram Cates from Inherit the Wind possess very similar roles. For example, both characters are the ones that instigate the conflict. Montag remembers that Faber would be someone that would possess the knowledge to aid him to bring back books and knowledge. Similarly, Bertram Cates is the one that sparks the Hillsborough court trial that leads Henry Drummond to the defense of progression of knowledge. Although both storylines are very different, they both possess parallels between characters.
The Isla Vista shootings were a series of shootings that took place in Isla Vista, California on May 23, 2014. The assailant, Elliot Rogers, shot 6 people and injured 13 more before committing suicide. In-depth analysis of the attack showed that the reason for Rogers' killing spree was his belief that women despised him and ignored him. He victimized women because they did not provide him with the love or sexual encounters he believed he deserved. Every society, real or fictional, has destructive characters. Today in our modern-day society, Roger is ours. His actions deconstruct and abolish the general principles that make an efficient and practical society. The repercussions of his actions were significant. He prompted the creation of #YesAllWoman, a hashtag on Twitter meant to promote equality and safety for women. Roger can easily be compared with the destructive characters from many pieces of literature: Bob Ewell from To Kill a Mockingbird, Matthew Harrison Brady from Inherit the Wind, Shylock from The Merchant of Venice, Hilly Holbrook from The Help, and Captain Beatty from Fahrenheit 451. All of these characters lack the proper ethics and morals and prevent their societies from evolving and changing. Roger's killing of 6 people in the name of his personal war against women destroyed progress made by the feminist movement to create a balanced, fair world for women. Since he halted the evolution of his society, Roger can be considered a destructive character, and his story parallels those from other literary works discussed in this Prezi.
The Tiger by William Blake. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what heart could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what a dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry?
The tiger can be related to Fahrenheit 451 through fire. Fire can be related to the physical and moral aspects of the tiger in the poem. Physically, the tiger is beautiful and fierce. Morally, it's powerful and horrific. Fire is considered beautiful, but it is also destructive and can be used for morally horrific acts. Throughout the novel, Montag and the other fellow firemen use fire to burn books and houses, thus highlighting its destructive nature and showing its horrific consequences. Similar to how a reader of Fahrenheit 451 realizes that the burning throughout the novel is appalling, in the tiger, and what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart, lead the reader to also realize the cruel nature of the tiger. Another way fire connects both works is through the fire imagery that is present. In the poem, such lines as "Tiger, tiger, burning bright, burnt the fire of thine eyes," and "In what furnace was thy brain?" use visual and auditory imagery to relate the tiger to fire. Likewise, in Fahrenheit 451, one of the main recurring symbols is fire. The use of fire to convey ideas in both Fahrenheit 451 and the tiger bridges the two.
The Tiger is a poem that questions the existence of a strong and fierce deity. Primarily, what was asked of the tiger was where he came from and what his purpose was. By the end, the question was why he did what he did. The tiger can relate to the Merchant of Venice because both pieces of writing explore the intentions and actions of each of the characters. While the poem focuses explicitly on the tiger deity, the Merchant of Venice reveals the objectives of several characters through the use of many literary devices such as asides, dramatic and verbal irony, soliloquies, and foreshadowing. While this occurs within several of the plots in The Merchant of Venice, it is primarily seen in the bond plot. Shylock reveals his target of getting revenge on Antonio when creating the terms of the bond, but later he is hit with a recombentibus, courtesy of the judge in the trial. This storyline follows the pattern of the poem. First, Shylock answers the questions of who he is and why he does what he does. Then he is interrogated and prosecuted for it. In The Tiger, this turnabout was evident in the repetition of the first and last stanzas. Say for one word, dare. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Was the forced rhyme that concluded the first stanza, and was mirrored in the sixth. What immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? This pair of nearly identical couplets show the poem's meaning in questioning the intentions and reasons for its characters' actions. Therefore, The Tiger is comparable to Merchant of Venice because both mutually reveal and question the behaviors of their respective characters.
The Tiger can be connected to the novel To Kill a Mockingbird through the similarity of format and through the common theme of loss of innocence. They are both connected through the format of the poem. The poem consists of 13 questions and one full sentence, conveying the idea of the speaker questioning the existence of the tiger. This connects to the character Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird due to her inquisitive nature. For instance, in chapter 14 of To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout asks her father Atticus about rape. This mature question asked by the young Scout is similar to the questions asked by the speaker in The Tiger, where he then comes to the mature realization that the tiger is both terrifying and beautiful force. Another way that To Kill a Mockingbird and the tiger can be connected is through the theme of loss of innocence. One of the main themes in To Kill a Mockingbird is loss of innocence. For example, this loss of innocence is indicated when Jem cries after Nathan Radley cements the knothole in the tree that was being used by Boo Radley to communicate with the children. Similarly, in The Tiger, the change of could to dare in the central question signifies that the reader has grown in maturity and has realized the fierce, majestic danger that is the tiger. Therefore, parallels can be drawn between both The Tiger and To Kill a Mockingbird through a common theme, the loss of innocence, and through format.
William Blake's The Tiger is a poem where the narrator is describing and contemplating a powerful force. In the beginning of the poem, the narrator is questioning if the existence of such a force is possible, and throughout the poem, the narrator is describing all the fearful attributes of the force. Towards the end of the poem, the narrator is no longer dwelling on the existence of this force, but rather is wondering why such a force would exist. Similarly, the seeming existence of a powerful force could relate to the societal views of Heavenly Hillsborough in Inherit the Wind. Many townsfolk in Inherit the Wind have been taught and raised in isolation from changing ideas and a changing world, and thusly have a fervent belief in the Bible. This isolation leads to the townsfolk believing that any new and unfamiliar idea is unbelievable and destructive, similar to the force in Blake's The Tiger. The Hillsborough residents view any contradiction to the Bible as twisted and cannot possibly have been a creation from God. Similarly, in line 20 of The Tiger, "Did he who made the lamb make thee?" could be referring to Jesus Christ as the lamb, and this line reflects the Hillsborough Society's perception of Darwin's theory of evolution. Therefore, due to the similar viewpoints between Inherit the Wind and The Tiger, parallels can be drawn between the two.
Richard Corey by Edwin Arlington Robinson. Whenever Richard Corey went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favoured and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said, "Good morning," and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything, to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat, and cursed the bread. And Richard Corey, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet in his head.
The poem Richard Corey is a narrative about a well-to-do man who commits suicide. This situation can be connected to Fahrenheit 451 through the common theme of deceiving appearances and similar characters found in both works. In Richard Corey, the central character, Richard Corey, puts on an outward appearance of a well-kept, well-to-do man that many people envy. At the end of the poem, however, it is revealed that Richard Corey was, in fact, not happy with his life, and he commits suicide. Likewise, in Fahrenheit 451, the protagonist, Guy Montag, is a fireman. A fireman is a well-respected position within the novel, as they maintain justice by destroying books. However, throughout the novel, it is revealed that Montag collects books in secret, and for a long time is able to hide them from his wife, superior, and society. Much like Corey in the poem, he hid his true self from society. Another connection that can be made is a character connection between Richard Corey and Guy Montag. In the poem, Corey is at the height of society and is envied, but it is revealed that he is depressed and suicidal. Similarly, in Fahrenheit 451, Montag is well respected because of his profession and seemingly happy until it is revealed through his interactions with Clarice that he is in fact unhappy with his life and society. Through the theme connections and character connections, both Fahrenheit 451 and Richard Corey are similar.
Richard Corey is a narrative poem about a man called Richard Corey and the repercussions of his life. Richard Corey can be compared to Antonio in The Merchant of Venice. Both of these characters are rich and well-liked in their respective societies, and their personas encourage the people around them to work harder in an attempt to become more like them. A noteworthy event in the poem occurs at the end, when it is revealed that Richard Corey committed suicide because so many people were attempting to follow in his footsteps. So on we worked and waited for the light, and Richard Corey, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. While Antonio did not kill himself in The Merchant of Venice, he risked his life in a similar fashion for his friend Bassanio. Due to Antonio's actions, Bassanio received a chance to woo his love, Portia, which could be considered his light. In the meantime, Antonio's life was on trial because of the bond he made with Shylock. Both Richard Cory and Antonio essentially gave up their lives for the people around them. It is through these characters' actions that parallels can be made between Richard Cory and the Merchant of Venice.
The poem Richard Cory and the novel To Kill a Mockingbird can be connected through the topic of deceiving appearances. In the poem, the central character, Richard Cory, is perceived as a well-kept man at the height of society. However, at the end of the poem, it is revealed that Cory was quite depressed, and as a result he commits suicide. Similarly, in To Kill a Mockingbird, the character Miss Dubose can also be associated with deceiving appearances, along with Richard Cory. The audience's first impression of her through the narrator Jean-Louise Scout Finch was that she was the meanest old woman who ever lived. Moreover, it was later revealed by Atticus that Miss Dubose was suffering from a morphine addiction, which she overcame right before her death. Despite being initially perceived as nasty and rude, Atticus declares that she was the bravest person he ever knew. In this fashion, both Richard Cory and To Kill a Mockingbird have a character that possesses the quality of deceiving appearances.
It can be concluded that the main character of this poem, Richard Cory, is an affluent white male. This is because of the time period and location in which the poem was written. This connects to The Help because the majority of the antagonists and one of the protagonists are wealthy and white. Richard Cory could also be paralleled with Hilly Holbrook, as they are both happy and well-liked at the beginning, but develop into a melancholy character by the end. In addition, Richard Cory deals with death, which appears in The Help in the form of Abileen's son, and Skeeter Phelan's former maid, Constance. The topic of deceiving appearances is present in the poem and novel as well. Richard Cory is portrayed as a man with very good and happy life, yet despite this, he commits suicide. Similarly, in The Help, Skeeter and the maids attempt to trick the population of the town because they do not want themselves to be revealed as the authors of the book. The Help and Richard Cory can be connected in many ways because they share several common themes.
The poem Richard Cory by Edwin Arlington Robinson illustrates a well-to-do man that, according to the townsfolk, commits suicide for no reason. Similarly, Bertram Cates from Inherit the Wind, according to the Society of the Townsfolk, figuratively commits suicide for no reason. Bertram Cates is a schoolteacher, and typically a schoolteacher is thought of as a role model. If a teacher does anything out of the ordinary, it would be outrageous and unaccepted. Thus, when Cates teaches something that goes against the Bible, which was the doctrine of the society, he destroyed everyone else's perception of him and, in other words, committed suicide. Therefore, due to similar atmospheres and societies, Robinson's Richard Cory and Inherit the Wind's protagonists can be analyzed together.
They say that Richard Cory owns one half of this whole town, with political connections to spread his wealth around. Born into society, a banker's only child, he had everything a man could want, power, grace, and style. But I work in his factory, and I curse the life I'm living, and I curse my poverty, and I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be Richard Cory. The papers print his picture almost everywhere he goes. Richard Cory at the opera, Richard Cory at a show, and the rumor of his parties and the orgies on his yacht. Oh, he surely must be happy with everything he's got. But I work in his factory, and I curse the life I'm living, and and I curse my poverty. And I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be Richard Thorn. He freely gave to charity, he had the common touch, and they were grateful for his patronage, and they thanked him very much. So my mind was filled with wonder when the evening headlines read, Richard Corey went home last night and put a bullet through his head. But I work in his factory, and I curse the life I'm living, and I curse my poverty, and I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be Richard Corey.